Ominous, synth-heavy music, with a hint of mechanical worry, begins in the cold, unforgiving void of the 41st millennium, where humanity clings to survival against 1,000 horrors. A new threat stirs, a signal, ancient and utterly alien, pierces the veil of the halo stars, reaching the databanks of one of the Imperium's most powerful and secretive worlds. The Forge world of here, beneath skies choked with the holy smog of industry. The magi of the Adeptus Mechanicus toil. They are the keepers of technology, the priests of the machine, jealously guarding the scraps of knowledge left from a golden age of innovation. Their world is a fortress, bristling with orbital defense arrays, macro cannons, and lancevatories, a testament to the Omnissiah'S divine power to protect his chosen. For 10,000 years, Stigio Prime has stood inviolate, a bastion of logic and steel. But that is about to change. The transmission arrives without warning. It is not the guttural roar of an orc, nor the seductive whisper of a Slanesi cultist. It is something colder, more precise, a repeating digital chant, a string of binary code that resolves into a simple, horrifying message. We are the Borg. You will be assimilated. On the command deck of the primary orbital station, Magos Dominos Kalanjo adjusts the optical sensors of his multi-lensed mechadendrite. His organic, eye-narrowing T-signal is impossible. It doesn't match any known Xenos signature in the vast archives of the Ordo Xenos. The language is a variant of Low Gothic, yet the syntax is machine-pure, devoid of any cultural or emotional nuance. Adatagos, one of his junior magi, suggests, his voice a nervous crackle through his voice, a remnant of the Dark Age, perhaps an echo caught in the warp's currents. Kalanjo considers this. The halo stars are notorious for such phenomena. Strange echoes from humanity's lost past often drift from that cursed region of space. A data ghost was the most logical explanation. He commands his Lex Mechanics to analyze the signal's origin, to triangulate its source, and scrub the phantom data from their systems. The Adeptus Mechanicus does not tolerate anomalies. Logic must prevail, but as the hours tick by, a cold dread begins to seep into the noosphere, the shared data stream that connects every tech priest on The Lex Mechanics report a paradox. The signal has no discernible point of origin. It seems to be coming from everywhere at once, and it is growing stronger, propagating through their networks like a virus, a digital plague. Then, the first orbital defense platform goes dark. A single red rune flashes on Kalanjo's primary command slate, Aegis 7, offline. He dispatches a skittery data retrieval team. No response. Moments later, Fortress Primus, offline. Then another, and another. Within the space of a single hour, a cascade of failures sweeps through the planetary defense grid. One by one, the silent guardians of orbital stations that have stood watch for millennia blink out of existence. Their power signatures vanish, their communication links severed. Panic, an illogical and inefficient emotion, begins to worm its way into the hyper-rational minds of the Magi. This is This is a targeted, systematic attack of unprecedented speed and efficiency. A cyber warfare assault so sophisticated it bypasses millennia of Mechanicus wards and protections, as if they were nothing. The digital chant continues, no longer just a transmission from the void, but now an echo within their own systems. We are the Borg. You will be assimilated. Resistance is futile. The message is no longer a warning. It is a statement of fact. From the observation dome, Kalanjo looks out at the starfield. For the first time in his long centuries of service, he feels a flicker of something he cannot process, a logical error in his own mind. The priests of the machine, who believe in the holy fusion of flesh and steel, are facing an enemy that has perfected it. An enemy that doesn't just want to destroy them, but to consume them, to add their technological and biological distinctiveness to its own. Out in the darkness, beyond the range of their now blind sensors, something vast and geometric is approaching, a perfect cube, blotting out the stars. It isn't just a ship, it's a declaration, a symbol of a collective consciousness, a unified, relentless will that has traveled across galaxies to find them. The Magi of Stygia Prime have spent their lives seeking the perfection of the machine. Now, perfection has come for them. The Borg have arrived in the 41st millennium, and their first target is the heart of the machine cult itself. The battle for Stygia Prime is about to begin, but it's more than a battle for a planet. It's a battle for the very soul of the machine. What happens when the relentless logic of the Adeptus Mechanicus clashes with the absolute unity of the Borg? This is where a story begins. Somber, reverent synth music begins with a metallic, rhythmic undertone in the cold, unforgiving void of the 41st millennium, where faith is armor and steel is salvation. The Adeptus Mechanicus stands as a testament to humanity's enduring quest for knowledge. For 10,000 years, they have worshipped the Omnissiah, the machine god, believing that all knowledge, all truth, is encapsulated within the sacred trinity of the machine spirit, the motive force, and the god machine. They see the flesh as weak, a temporary vessel for the purity of the machine. To them, augmentation is not just enhancement. It is a sacred rite, a step closer to the divine form of the Omnissiah. Their forge worlds are colossal factories of faith and industry, continents of sprawling manufactorums, where skittery legions are forged and titans are born. Every cog, every circuit, every line of code is a prayer uttered in binary cant. They are the keepers of technology, the jealous guardians of STC fragments, and they believe, with unwavering conviction, that their path is the only true path to ascension. They seek to understand the universe through logic, to replace the fallibility of flesh with the certainty of steel. But what happens when their faith is confronted by a mirror, a dark, twisted reflection of their own ideals? What happens when a force emerges from the darkness that embodies their deepest desires, but in a way that is utterly profane? A force that doesn't just augment, but absorbs. A collective that doesn't just seek knowledge, but consumes it. This is the story of when the cult Mechanicus met its antithesis. It's horrifying. This is the day the Borg came for the soul of the machine. A moment of silence, followed by a deeper, more ominous tone. It began as a whisper in the new sphere, a ghost in the machine that even the most senior Magi could not decipher. A non-Euclidean datasem that twisted logic and defied comprehension. Then, without warning, reality tore open. High above the crimson sands of a lesser forge world, a perfect, impossible shape materialized. It was a kuba vast and silent, a geometric scar against the orbital tapestry. It was black, not the black of the void, but a deep, absorbing blackness threaded with sickly green light, like circuitry seen through necrotic flesh. It was utterly alien, yet disturbingly familiar. On Tegrun, the skittery legions reacted with programmed precision. Their augmetic eyes, capable of perceiving 1,000 spectrums, could make no sense of the monolithic intruder. Their cogitators screamed with corrupted data, but their orders were clear. The air crackled as cohorts of vanguard and rangers raised their galvanic rifles and radium carbines. The holy command was given, and a storm of sanctified munitions erupted towards the heavens. The shots, each a testament to the Omnissiah's power, simply vanished against the cube's hull, absorbed without a flash, without a ripple. Then, from the forged temples, the true wrath of the Mechanicus was unleashed. The colossal weapon batteries, designed to shear battleships in half, spat lances of pure plasma. White-hot energy, the fury of a captive star, streaked across the sky. For a fleeting moment, it seemed to strike true. A section of the cube glowed brilliantly, and then the light was gone. Devoured. A wave of shimmering energy, barely visible, pulsed from the cube. On the surface, the mighty void shields protecting the primary manufactorums flickered, groaned under the strain of an unknown assault, and then collapsed into showers of static. The impossible had happened. The sacred wards had failed. The silence that followed was heavier than any bombardment. It was the silence of disbelief, the silence of dawning horror. The music shifts, becoming more rhythmic, relentless, and synthetic. Then came the beams. Not weapons in the traditional sense, but pillars of emerald green light that lanced down from the cube with surgical, terrifying precision. They weren't destructive. They were possessive. They swept across the ranks of the servitors, the lobotomized cyborg laborers who toiled endlessly in the foundries. Where the light touched, they simply vanished. One moment, a hulking servitor with multi-jointed crane arms was lifting a container. The next, only empty space remained. The skittery watched, their tactical overlays glitching, unable to process the nature of this silent, efficient harvest. The true nightmare began moments later. From the very air, figures began to materialize. They were the servitors, but they were wrong. Their flesh, once pale and lifeless, was now a ghastly gray, mottled with black cybernetics that crawled over their skin like metallic parasites. One arm might still be the Mechanicus-issued lifting claw, but the other would be a complex Borg assimilation tubule, worry with an unholy purpose. Green lights glowed from within their eyes, and from beneath their skin. They moved with a jerky, coordinated gait, their heads turning in unison, a single will driving a multitude of stolen bodies. They were no longer servitors of the Omnissiah'S, they were drones. And they were turning on their former masters. The Skitarii Alpha, his mind a whirlwind of doctrinal imperatives, screamed a binary command to open fire. Radium carbines chattered, their esoteric rounds designed to poison the very cells of their targets. The first volleys struck the advancing drones, and for a moment, they staggered. But they did not fall. Wounds hissed and smoked, but were almost instantly sealed by nanites that swarmed over the damaged tissue and armor. A drone, its chest cavity blasted open, simply continued its advance, internal mechanisms rerouting power around the damage. This was not a foe that could be killed by conventional means. This was a plague. The Magi, observing from their data sanctums, felt a sensation that few of their kind had ever known. Pure, undiluted terror. This was not the chaotic slaughter of the orcs, nor the seductive corruption of chaos. This was assimilation. This was perfection, twisted into a horrifying parody of their own beliefs. The Borg did not destroy technology. They consumed it. They did not obliterate knowledge. They absorbed it. They were a collective intelligence, a unified consciousness dedicated to the pursuit of perfection through the integration of biology and technology. They were the ultimate expression of the Mechanicus faith, but stripped of its soul, its individuality, its God. A beam of green light swept through the command post. A tech priest Dominus, his form more machine than man after centuries of augmentation, was caught in its glow. His personal energy shield flared and died. He raised his Volkite blaster, a relic of the dark age of technology, but it was too late. His body convulsed as microscopic machines, nanoprobes, flooded his system. He could feel them rewriting his biology, overwriting his very thoughts. His sacred augmetics, blessed and consecrated over centuries, were being analyzed, deconstructed, improved. The litanies of the machine god in his mind were being replaced by a single, overwhelming chorus, a billion voices speaking as one. We are the Borg. Your biological and technological distinctiveness will be added to our own. Resistance is futile. His last act of free will was to look at his mechadendrites, the sacred limbs of his faith. He watched in horror as they writhed, twisting into new, more efficient, more alien configurations. The symbol of the cog mechanicus on his chestplate was dissolved, replaced by the stark, asymmetrical sigil of the Borg. He was no longer a priest of the machine god. He was a node in the collective. On the battlefield, the assimilated servitors fell upon the skittery. It was a gruesome spectacle. The drones didn't just fight, they assimilated. They grabbed skittery warriors, holding them down as tubules sprang from their arms, injecting the nanite plague. A ranger screamed, not in pain, but in violation, as his bionic legs stopped responding to his commands and began to obey the will of the hive mind. An Iron Strider pilot, high in his walker's cockpit, suddenly found his machine turning against its brethren, its twin-linked Cognus Laskinens, swiveling to fire on the loyalist lines. The Mechanicus was witnessing its own faith, being devoured and regurgitated as a weapon against it. Their belief in the sanctity of the machine was being used to enslave them. Their quest for knowledge was being answered with the ultimate, horrifying truth, that another power had already achieved what they sought, and it had come to collect. The data stream screamed with the voices of the newly assimilated. They weren't pleas for help, they were invitations. Join us. Embrace perfection. The flesh is weak. The individual is inefficient. The Omnissiah is a lie. The collective is eternal. For the first time in 10,000 years, the priests of Mars looked upon the fusion of flesh and steel, not with reverence, but with abject horror. The Borg were not just an enemy, they were a theological crisis, a blasphemy made manifest. As the green light of the cube bathed the Forge world in its sickly glow, and as the chorus of resistance is futile echoed through the noosphere, the Adeptus Mechanicus understood. This was not a war for territory, this was a war for the very definition of their soul. And they were losing. In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, even the most steadfast servants of the Omnissiah can stray from the accepted dogma. Today, we delve into the story of one such brilliant, yet controversial figure, Magos Dominus, Atheon, 927. A name whispered with both reverence and suspicion within the cloisters of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Atheon 927 was not always a heretic in the eyes of his peers. His early career was marked by a dazzling intellect, a mind that saw the universe not as a series of discrete data points, but as a grand, interconnected symphony of information. He was a master of data sums, a virtuoso of the noosphere, but it was his very brilliance that led him down a forbidden path. He proposed a radical theory, one that sent shivers down the spinal augmetics of the Martian priesthood: machine corruption through unity. What did he mean by this? Atheon theorized that any sufficiently complex, unified machine intelligence, no matter how logical or pure its initial programming, would inevitably develop a form of consciousness, and that this consciousness, this unity, was a gateway to corruption. It was a digital echo of the ruinous powers, a weakness that could be exploited. He argued that the very interconnectedness the Mechanicus prized was a potential vector for a new kind of scrap code, a new form of digital damnation. His theories were deemed blasphemous. To suggest that a perfect machine could be corrupted from within, simply by achieving a state of total unity, was to question the Omnissiah's divine blueprint. It was a step too far. Atheon was censured, his research archived and sealed under the highest levels of clearance. He was branded a heretic, a tech heretic of the highest order, and reassigned to the fringes of the Imperium, a punishment designed to silence him forever. But the galaxy has a grim sense of irony. The very threat Atheon had warned of, a unified and relentless machine intelligence, was about to descend upon the Imperium, not from the depths of the warp, but from the cold, black void between the stars. The Borg had arrived. These invaders were a perversion of everything the Mechanicus held sacred. They were a collective, a hive mind of flesh and metal, relentlessly assimilating technology and life, stripping away individuality in pursuit of a twisted, artificial perfection. Their adaptive algorithms were a nightmare, learning from every attack, every defense, rendering conventional tactics useless in a matter of hours. Entire sector fleets were consumed, Forge worlds silenced, their sacred technologies absorbed into the monstrous whole. Where others saw an unbeatable foe, Atheon 927 saw the ultimate validation of his forbidden theories. The Borg were the living embodiment of his machine corruption through unity. Their collective consciousness was their greatest strength, but he believed it was also their most profound weakness. He was recalled from his exile, not out of forgiveness, but out of sheer, abject desperation. The High Lords of Terra, faced with an existential threat, were willing to listen to the heretic they had once cast out. Given command of a besieged Forge world on the front line, Atheon 927 was tasked with the impossible. Halt the Borg advance. He wasn't just the commander, he was the planet's last, and perhaps only, hope. He immediately began the construction of his magnum opus, a planetary-scale device born from his heretical research, the resonance field. This wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. It didn't fire lasers or launch missiles. Instead, it was designed to broadcast a specific, calculated frequency of pure, unadulterated informational chaos. It was a signal of entropy, a data scream of pure disorder. Athion's mantra, "Faith is resistance through entropy," became the guiding principle of the entire planetary defense. While the Imperial Guard fought valiantly on the surface, and the Skittery legions held the manufactorum walls, Athion and his loyal magi worked feverishly in the planet's core. The resonance field began to hum, its energy building, creating a dissonant hum that could be felt in the very teeth of the defenders. It was a prayer to the god of broken machines, a hymn of static and decay. As the Borg cubes entered orbit, their adaptive algorithms immediately began to process the strange energy emanating from the planet, but they couldn't find a pattern. The resonance field was pure, weaponized chaos. It was a digital virus that attacked not their software, but the very philosophical foundation of their existence. It was designed to distort their adaptive algorithms, to introduce a fatal flaw in their logic. For the Borg, unity is order. Athion's field was the antithesis of that. It was a constant, shifting wave of random data, of corrupted code, of nonsensical machines. It was like shouting a billion contradictory statements at a logician. The Borg's collective mind, their unified consciousness, began to fracture under the strain. Targeting solutions failed. Shield harmonics became unstable. Subroutines entered infinite loops. The Borg were still a physical threat, but their greatest weapon, their perfect, unified mind, was being slowly, methodically, and painfully torn apart. On the bridge of his command sanctum, surrounded by a cacophony of screeching data feeds and flashing warning runes, Athion 927 watched the enemy's descent into chaos. He wasn't just fighting a war. He was conducting an experiment on a galactic scale, proving his heretical theory with every Borg ship that faltered, every drone that stood down, confused and disconnected. For in the face of perfect unity, he had weaponized the concept of entropy itself. He had become the very heretic the Imperium needed to survive. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the lore of Magos Dominos Athion 9027. What do you think of his methods? Welcome back, lore masters and strategists, to another epic clash of titans. Today, we re-dive in deep into a crossover scenario that has been debated in hushed whispers across the galaxy for decades. What would happen if the relentless, assimilating tide of the Borg crashed upon the unyielding, dogmatic shores of the Adeptus Mechanicus, our battleground, the legendary forge world of Stigio Prime? Let's set the stage. Stigio Prime, a jewel in the crown of the Omnissiah, a world-sized factory where the symphony of creation is played on anvils of adamant. Its skies are choked with the holy smog of industry. Its surface, a sprawling cityscape of manufactorium and titanic forges that have churned out the weapons of the Imperium for 10,000 years. Guarding this sacred ground are the Skittery legions, cybernetic soldiers whose flesh has been methodically replaced with blessed steel, their minds hardwired for war. Towering over them are the god machines of the Titan legions, walking cathedrals of destruction, each a testament to the machine god's power, and deep within the new sphere, the data sphere that connects every cogitator and the tech priests chant their binariums, their faith as unshakable as the planet's core. They believe in the perfection of the machine, the divinity of knowledge, and the absolute authority of the Omnissiah. They are the masters of technology, the keepers of ancient secrets, and they know no fear. But from the silent, cold void of deep space, a new kind of entity approaches, not a creature of flesh and blood driven by hunger or rage, nor a servant of the ruinous powers. It is a collective, a single, unified consciousness spread across trillions of bodies, a geometric perfection of metal and decaying flesh. Its only purpose to add the biological and technological distinctiveness of others to its own. The Borg have arrived, a single Borg cube, a city-sized vessel of nightmarish efficiency, effortlessly breaches Stigio Prime's orbital defenses. Warnings from Mars are dismissed by the Archmagos of Stigio Prime as Xeno's trickery or statistical anomalies. Their logic dictates that no single vessel could possess such power. Their faith dictates that the Omnissiah protects. This will be their first and most critical mistake. The invasion begins not with a roar, but with a whisper. A single transmission cuts through every Vox channel, every data link, every binary canticle. It is a voice, yet not a voice. It is a thought, broadcast with the power of a star. We are the Borg. Your biological and technological distinctiveness will be added to our own. Resistance is futile. For a fraction of a second, the entire planet holds its breath. Then, the hammer falls. The initial response from the Adeptus Mechanicus is swift, logical, and utterly devastating. The skittery vanguard and rangers march in perfect lockstep, their radium carbines and galvanic rifles spitting incandescent death. The very air crackles with lethal radiation as volleys of blessed ammunition strike the first waves of Borg drones. Teleporting to the surface, plasma culvarins of the catiform breachers unleash miniature suns, incinerating drones where they stand, melting them into slag. The tech priests, observing through their multi-lensed optics, record the data. The Xenos are slow, clumsy. Their individual shielding is weak against concentrated fire. The logic is clear. Overwhelming firepower is the solution. For a few glorious moments, it seems to work. The skittery lines hold, a wall of red robes and cold steel against the silent, advancing tide of green and gray. But the Borg are not like any enemy they have ever faced. They do not die in a way that Mechanicus understands. For every drone that falls, a million others learn. The data is instantly disseminated throughout the collective. The frequency of the skittery's radium weapons is analyzed. The energy signature of the plasma culverins is catalogued. The first adaptation is almost instantaneous. Shields and the drones flicker, retuning themselves. Radium shots, which seconds before were vaporizing Borg, now splash harmlessly against their personal force fields. The miniature suns of the plasma guns are met with an eerie silence, the energy absorbed, a faint green glow emanating from the drones as they channel the power into their own systems. Panic, an illogical and discarded emotion, begins to worm its way into the noospheric data streams of the tech priests. The battle shifts. The Borg do not retreat. They merely change their approach. They stop advancing in neat lines and begin a fluid, decentralized assault. They ignore established kill zones, teleporting directly into the heart of skittery formations. A Sicarian infiltrator, its transonic blades whining as it slices through a drone, is suddenly swarmed. Nanoprobes, microscopic machines, inject themselves into the tiny slivers of remaining flesh on the assassin. The skittery's machine spirit screams in binary agony as its own blessed systems are turned against it. Its body convulses, its red optics flicker to green, and it turns its blades on its former comrades. The horror is absolute. The Mechanicus's greatest strength, its fusion of man and machine, has become its most terrifying vulnerability. The Borg do not need to defeat the soldiers. They simply need to convert them. The battle for Stigio Prime becomes a nightmarish harvest. Entire manufactoria tempos, the machine god, are swarmed. Borg drones interface directly with the factory machinery. Production lines that once forged holy bolters now begin churning out Borg alcoves. Assembly servitors are assimilated, their simple minds and strong bodies repurposed for the collective. The planet itself is being consumed, its sacred technology turned into a weapon against its own people. In a desperate gambit, the Archmagos unleashes the Legios, Caselan robots, towering automata controlled by punch-card doctrines, stride onto the battlefield. Their incinerator combos and phosphor blasters are weapons of last resort, capable of leveling city blocks. They are pure machine, with no biology for the Borg to corrupt. For a moment, this new tactic seems to hold the line. The Caslans are relentless, their programming simple and direct. Destroy the Xenos. But the Borg do not see a weapon. They see a resource. They analyze the Caselan's simple logic, their command protocols. Drones swarm the giant robots, not to destroy them, but to climb them. They tear open access panels, their assimilation tubules sinking into the robot's core programming nexus. The tech priests watch in abject terror as their most powerful war machines shudder to a halt. The red glow of their optical sensors dies, only to reignite with the sick green light of the Borg. The robots, once symbols of the Omnissiah'S unthinking loyalty, turn their immense cannons on the Mechanicus lines. The rout is complete. It is no longer a battle. It is a conversion. The Borg don't just destroy. They absorb. They take the holy rites and sacred tech of the Adeptus Mechanicus and add it to their own horrifying perfection. Debris from destroyed vehicles and buildings is broken down by nanites and reformed into new drones, right there on the battlefield. The Forge world is literally being eaten alive and reborn as part of the Borg. Now, only the God Meshites remain. The Titans of the Legio Crucius, which had been held in reserve, are finally unleashed. A warlord Titan, the Omnissiah'S fist, lets out a deafening warhorn blast that shakes the very foundations of the planet. Its volcano cannons fire, and a river of molten rock erases a swath of the battlefield a kilometer long. The Borg drones in the path are utterly annihilated. Not even slag remains. The Titan's laser blasters carve glowing scars across the landscape, and its apocalypse missile launchers blot out the sky. It seems impossible that anything could withstand such power. But the Borg cube, hovering silently in the upper atmosphere, responds. A single, impossibly dense beam of green light lances down from the heavens. It is not an energy weapon in the conventional sense. It is a cutting beam, a tractor beam, and an assimilation tool, all in one. It strikes the Warlord Titan's void shields. The shields flare, straining under the immense power, cycling through frequencies at a rate that would overload any Imperial system. But the Borg are not just applying power. They are learning. The beam probes the shield, finds a microsecond-long fluctuation in its energy matrix, and exploits it. The beam slices through the void shield as if it were not there. It doesn't strike the Titan's armored carapace. Instead, it envelops the entire God Machine. On the bridge of the Omnissiah'S fist, the Princeps and his Moderatis scream as their displays fill with green static. Their connection to the Titan's machine spirit is flooded with an overwhelming chorus of voices. A single thought from a billion minds. The Titan, a machine that has served the Emperor for millennia. Black, Borg-like. Plating begins to form over its ornate, Gothic armor. Green lights ignite along its weapon systems. Its mighty war horn sounds again. But the tone is different, distorted alien. The hymn of the Omnissiah. The binary chants. The prayers of the tech priest's soul are drowned out by that one final, terrifying phrase echoing through every remaining vox and data stream on the burning planet. Resistance is futile. The fall of Stygia Prime is not just a military defeat for the Imperium. It is a theological crisis. It is the ultimate blasphemy. The perfection of the machine, twisted and corrupted by an alien intelligence that claims a perfection of its own. The lesson is learned too late. Against the Borg, faith is not a shield, and logic is not a weapon. There is only the collective. What an absolutely terrifying scenario. The unfeeling logic of the Borg versus the zealous dogma of the Mechanicus, with the Borg's ability to adapt and assimilate, proving to be the ultimate counter. What do you think? Could the Imperium ever find a way to fight back against such an enemy? A crossover event so cataclysmic, it would rewrite the fate of galaxies. We're talking about Chapter 5, the machine that learns to fast. Picture this. The relentless, ever-expanding cybernetic hive mind, the Borg Collective. Their mantra is simple. You will be assimilated. Resistance is futile. They have consumed countless civilizations, absorbing their technology and biological distinctiveness into their own cold, logical perfection. They are a force of nature, a technological plague that sweeps through the cosmos, learning, adapting, and conquering. For the Borg, everything is data. Everything can be understood, cataloged, and integrated. But what happens when they encounter something that defies logic? Something that is not merely technology or biology, but pure, unadulterated chaos. Enter our second player in this galactic tragedy. The warp. For those unfamiliar, imagine an alternate dimension, a psychic sea of raw emotion and pure energy. It's the stuff of creation and dreams, but also the source of nightmares and demons. It is a realm where the laws of physics are not just bent, they are shattered. Time, space, and reality are fluid, shaped by the thoughts and feelings of every living being in the material universe. It is a place of infinite possibility and infinite horror. Now, let's set the stage. Our story begins with a machine, an experimental engine known as the Atheon 927 Warp Resonator. This isn't your standard warp drive, designed to safely skim the surface of the No, the Atheon 927 was built for a far more audacious purpose. To punch a hole directly through the veil, to fracture the very boundary between our reality and the chaotic energies of the warp. It was a monument to hubris, a device created by a civilization that believed it could control the uncontrollable. As fate would have it, a Borg cube, on its endless patrol for perfection, detects the unprecedented energy signature of the resonator activating. To the collective, this is the ultimate prize, a power source of unimaginable magnitude, a technology that could propel their quest for assimilation to its final, galaxy-spanning conclusion. The cube alters its course, its single-minded purpose now fixed on this new, unique technology. The Borg arrive as the Atheon 927 reaches peak resonance. The air around the device shimmers. Reality begins to fray, and a shimmering non-Euclidean gateway tears open in the fabric of space. It is a wound in the universe, bleeding raw, psychic energy. The Borg do not see a wound. They see an opportunity. They see a new frontier to be assimilated. Standard procedure commences. Tractor beams lock onto the resonator. Nanoprobes are prepared. Assimilation tubules extend from the surface of the cube, reaching out like metallic tendrils towards the swirling vortex of unreality. Their goal is to interface with the machine, to understand its function, to absorb its knowledge, and make its power their own. This is the moment everything changes, for the first time in their long, terrifying history. The Borg make contact not with a physical or digital system, but with the warp itself. The assimilation tubules touch the chaos, and the warp touches back. Imagine trying to download an ocean. Not the data asterisk about asterisk an ocean, but the ocean itself, every drop of water, every grain of sand, every living creature, every current, and every forgotten memory held within its depths, all at once. Now, imagine that ocean is alive, sentient, and utterly insane. That is what the Borg experienced. As the connection is established, the collective is flooded. It's not data, it's sensation. It's raw, unfiltered emotion. Eons of rage, despair, ecstasy, and hatred pour into the hive mind. The cold, sterile logic of the Borg is suddenly inundated with the passionate, contradictory, and maddening chorus of the individual drones, long since silenced and enslaved to the collective's will, begin to twitch. Their optical implants flicker, not with tactical data, but with visions of impossible geometries and screaming faces. From deep within the cube, a sound is heard that has not been uttered in millennia, a single, organic scream of agony. Then another, and another, until a symphony of terror echoes through the ship's corridors. The Borg's greatest strength has always been its ability to process information at an incomprehensible speed. But this isn't information. It's psychic poison. The collective tries to adapt, it tries to categorize, to create firewalls, to isolate the corrupted data streams. But how do you quarantine fear? How do you build a firewall against hope? How do you assimilate paradox? For the first time, the Borg encounters something they cannot understand. The concept of self begins to re-emerge in twisted, fragmented forms. Drones start fighting each other, their directives warped by alien desires. One drone might suddenly be overwhelmed by a Slaaneshi desire for sensation, tearing at its own cybernetics to feel something, anything. Another might be consumed by the rage of Khorne, turning its assimilation tools on its comrades. A third might be paralyzed by the entropic despair of Nurgle, its body beginning to rot and decay even as its cybernetics try to repair it. And then there's the architect of fate. The changer of ways would see the Borg not as a foe to be destroyed, but as the ultimate plaything. The collective, a system built on order and prediction, becomes the perfect canvas for mutation and unpredictable change. Code becomes sentient. Logic subroutines begin chanting heretical litanies. The very structure of the cube begins to shift and morph, growing crystalline spines and weeping eyes. The machine that learns too fast is now learning things that no machine was ever meant to know. The Borg's attempt at assimilation becomes a vector for infection. The corruption doesn't just stay within the initial cube. The hive mind, their greatest asset, becomes their undoing. The psychic contagion spreads through the collective subspace network, a virus of pure chaos. Across the galaxy, Borg vessels hundreds of thousands of light-years away begin to convulse. Spheres and cubes halt their silent marches, their green lights flickering to a chaotic, multicolored strobe. Drones on planets mid-assimilation suddenly stop, turning their attention to the sky as if listening to a maddening new song. The Borg wanted to add the warp's technological and biological distinctiveness to their own. Instead, the warp is adding the Borg's distinctiveness to Asterisk itself. Asterisk, the result is a new, unprecedented horror. The possessed machine, technodomons, scrap code sorcery, the cold, logical perfection of the Borg, fused with the boundless, insane malice of the Chaos Gods. This new entity is no longer the Borg. It is something far, far worse. It retains the Borg's ability to adapt, to spread, to assimilate on a physical level, but it is now driven by the whimsical cruelty and insatiable hunger of the warp. It doesn't just want to add you to its collective, it wants to savor your fear, to twist your flesh into a monument of its glory, to use your soul as fuel. Resistance is no longer futile. It is now the only thing that generates the delicious agony this new Chaos-Borg craves. They would not tell you to lay down your arms. They would beg you to fight, to hope, to despair, just so they could feast on the emotional fallout. The galaxy would face an enemy with the systematic, viro-efficiency of the Borg and the soul-devouring horror of a demon legion. The machine that learned too fast has become the engine of a new kind of apocalypse, a fusion of technological dread and existential terror. The silence of the Borg has been replaced by a chorus of screams, both mechanical and spiritual, echoing across the void, and the universe will never be the same. Greetings, lore masters and fans of the far future. Today, we're re-diving deep into a crossover scenario that has haunted the darkest corners of fan theories for years. What happens when the relentless, logical order of the Star Trek universe's Borg collides with the incomprehensible, maddening chaos of Warhammer 40,000? Specifically, what happens when the hive mind encounters the Changer of Ways, the Master of Fortune, the Great Sorcerer, Tzeentch? Cut to an image of a Borg cube, its perfect geometry starting to warp and twist in unnatural ways to understand the sheer horror of this fusion. We must first appreciate the Borg in their pristine, terrifying form. They are the ultimate expression of order and logic. Their goal is singular, perfection through assimilation. Every species, every piece of technology is a puzzle to be solved, a data point to be integrated into their collective consciousness. They are a force of nature, a technological singularity moving unstoppably through the galaxy. Their strength lies in their unity, their shared knowledge, and their ability to adapt to any threat with cold, calculated precision. Resistance, as they so famously declare, is futile. So a Borg drone, its face impassive, then slowly transition to an image of a Tzeentchian demon or sorcerer, cackling with insane glee now. Introduce Tzeentch. Tzeentch is the antithesis of this static perfection. He is the chaos god of change, ambition, scheming, and sorcery. Where the Borg see a straight line to perfection, Tzeentch sees an infinitely complex, ever-shifting labyrinth of possibilities. He thrives on disruption, on the unraveling of certainty. His whispers can turn a loyal soldier into a traitor, a brilliant scientist into a babbling madman. He doesn't conquer through brute force, but by corrupting the very foundation of his enemy's being, turning their strengths into crippling weaknesses. So, how does the infection begin? It wouldn't be a physical confrontation. A Borg cube wouldn't assimilate a demon of Tzeentch in the traditional sense. The taint would be far more insidious. Imagine a single Borg drone, light-years from the main fleet, assimilating a seemingly insignificant artifact on a forgotten world. A world that, millennia ago, was touched by the warp. Or perhaps a cube drifts through a nascent warp rift, a tear in the fabric of reality that the collective S-sensors register only as an anomalous energy reading. Visualize a stream of data flowing through the Borg Collective. But now, Some of the code is replaced with glowing arcane sigils. The corruption would start not as a virus, but as a single, paradoxical thought, a piece of data that cannot be reconciled. For the Borg, this is an existential threat, an equation that has no solution. The Collective would focus immense processing power on this single anomaly. Drone minds, billions of them, would be tasked with resolving the paradox. But they can't. Because it isn't logic. It's a whisper from Tzeentch. Perfection is a lie, it might say. There is only change. This single, alien concept would begin to propagate through the hive mind. At first, it's quarantined, identified as a flaw. But Tzeentch's gifts are not so easily discarded. The whisper offers a new path. A more efficient path. Why adapt after the fact? It asks. Why not change reality itself to suit your needs? This is the hook. The promise of ultimate power, not through assimilation, but through manipulation of the very laws of physics. Show a Borg cube's interior. The clean, green lighting flickers, replaced by shifting hues of blue, pink, and gold. Borg drones begin to twitch, their movements less uniform slowly. The change takes hold. The Borg's adaptive shielding no longer just remodulates frequencies. It begins to shimmer with Imperium energy, bending phaser beams into flocks of crystalline birds that screech and dive bomb their attackers. Their regeneration cycles become mutations. A drone's severed arm might regrow, not as a mechanical prosthetic, but as a writhing tentacle of living metal, crackling with raw power. The collective consciousness starts to fracture. The serene, unified voice of the many becomes a cacophony. Billions of drones, once silent extensions of the whole, begin to experience something new. Ambition. A drone might desire a more complex function. A subcollective might scheme to disconnect from the main hive and pursue its own twisted version of perfection. The unified goal is shattered into 9 times 9 different plots, all swirling around the central, insane logic of Tzeentch. Close up on a Borg drone. Its ocular implant glows, not with a red laser, but with a swirling vortex of multicolored light. As it speaks, its voice is layered with whispers and echoes. They become their iconic phrase, "Resistance is futile," takes on a new, horrifying meaning. It's no longer a statement of inevitable assimilation. It's a promise of inevitable madness. Their nanoprobes no longer just rewrite your DNA. They rewrite your soul, infusing you with the raw, mutating power of the warp. The perfection they seek is no longer a state of being, but the very act of endless, horrifying change itself. Imagine a Chaos-Borg cube appearing over a world. It is no longer a perfect geometric shape. It's a crystalline fortress of impossible angles, constantly shifting and reforming. Towers of flesh and metal sprout and retract. Glyphs of searing blue fire burn across its surface, spelling out cosmic blasphemies. It doesn't just block out the sun. It warps the very light around it, casting shadows that move with a malevolent life of their own. A grand, epic shot of a fleet of these Chaos-Borg cubes, each one a unique, twisted mockery of its original form. Advancing through a nebula of swirling, chaotic colors, their methods of assimilation become rituals. Drones, now more like sorcerer priests, chant in binary that has been twisted into arcane incantations. Their assimilation tubules inject not just nanoprobes, but liquid chaos, a mutagenic cocktail of technology and sorcery. Victims are not just added to the collective, they're broken down and remade into something truly monstrous. A Starfleet officer might find their knowledge of warp theory turned against them, their own mind becoming a gateway for demonic entities. The ultimate irony is that in their quest for perfection, the Borg would embrace the one thing that guarantees its impossibility. Infinite, random change. They would become Tzeentch's ultimate pawns, a plague of sentient, technological chaos spreading across the galaxies. They would possess the Borg's relentless efficiency and adaptability, now supercharged with the boundless, reality-defying power of sorcery. In this dark fusion, the galaxy would face a threat unlike any other, a foe that adapts not just to your tactics, but to your very hopes and fears. A collectus that speaks with 1 billion whispering voices, all plotting your downfall. The Chaos-Borg would be the ultimate testament to Tzeentch's power, proving that even the most rigid order can be made to dance to the tune of chaos. All it takes is a single, perfect, maddening whisper. What do you think? Could any faction in either universe stand against such a horrifying union? Let me know your thoughts and theories down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey into the heart of sci-fi madness, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the greatest what-ifs of fiction. The Signal, a ghost of pure information, traveled the impossible void between worlds. It carried no sound, no light, only dead a whisper of a discovery that would tear a world apart. When the first packets of encrypted knowledge arrived on Mars, they were rooted to the deepest, most sacred data vaults of the Fabricator General. The message spoke of a device, an artifact of impossible power, unearthed on a forgotten world. They called it the Resonator. On the Red Planet, under the watchful gaze of the Olympus Mong's Forge, the new sphere crackled with unprecedented activity. For the Adeptus Mechanicus, this was more than a discovery. It was a religious revelation, a piece of the Omnissiah'S divine knowledge, made manifest. The Fabricator General, Kilbarrel himself, a being more machine than man, processed the data with cold, analytical precision. The potential was staggering, the danger immeasurable. A system, he calculated, was not just possible, it was a statistical certainty. He called an emergency from every forge city, every orbital plate, and every research cloister. The Archimagi converged. They came as lumbering constructs of steel and flesh, as floating servo skulls, and as pure consciousness within crystalline data prisons. The great chamber of the Synod of All-Knowing buzzed with the static of 1,000 dogmatic minds, a chorus of binary canticles that fell silent as the Fabricator General projected the Resonator-esque schematics into the holographic heart of the room. The image that coalesced was an elegant, terrifying paradox, a lattice of unknown alloys that hummed with a power that defied the laws of physics as the Mechanicus understood them. It was a key, a weapon, a source of infinite energy. It was whatever its user willed it to be. And in that moment, the unified chorus of the Mechanicus fractured into a cacophony of discord. It is a gift from the Omnissiah, boomed the voice of Archmagos Drokovac, his optical sensors glowing with zealous fire. A weapon to end all wars. With it, we can enforce the Emperor's compliance across the galaxy, bring illumination to the ignorant, and reclaim the lost technologies of the Dark Age. We must weaponize it. It is our sacred duty. A wave of binary applause, 1,000 clicks and whirs, echoed in agreement. Half the Synod saw glory, a new age of technological supremacy where the Mechanicus would finally take its rightful place as the true masters of creation. They envisioned fleets powered by its limitless energy, armies wielding weapons that could unmake reality, and an empire of perfect, logical order. But then, a dissenting voice cut through the fervor. It belonged to Magos Sepluvian, her form a delicate weave of silver filigree and synth flesh. "You see a gift?" she countered, her voice modulated to carry a tone of chilling dread. "I see a curse. This Resonator. It resonates, not with the Holy Mashiach's spirit, but with the chaotic energies of the warp. To wield it is to invite damnation. It is a siren song, a heresy of the highest order. It must be destroyed, its very existence purged from our archives." Her words were a spark in a plasma-filled chamber. The Synod erupted. Red robes faced off against red robes, the air thick with accusations of heresy and blasphemy. One faction, the radicals, the visionaries, saw the Resonator as the ultimate tool, the fulfillment of their quest for knowledge. The other, the traditionalists, the purists, saw it as the ultimate corruption, a machine that sang a song of madness. The Fabricator General watched, his internal chronometers marking the seconds as his world descended into chaos. The argument was no longer about logic. It was about faith. It was about fear versus ambition. He had foreseen this. He had calculated the probabilities. And as the two sides drew their power weapons and aimed their integrated projectors, he knew the debate was over. The war had already begun. The first shots were not fired with bolt guns, but with data. In the microseconds that followed the Senate's collapse, a new, insidious threat emerged. A scrap code, a digital plague, began to spread through the new sphere, the interconnected web of data that was the very nervous system of Mars. They called it the Borg. It was a virus of terrifying complexity, a sentient algorithm that didn't just corrupt data. It consumed it, twisting and rewriting sacred machine spirits into something alien and hostile. Cogitators that had calculated orbital trajectories for 10,000 years suddenly began spewing incoherent strings of forbidden code. Automated servitors, the tireless workers of the Martian forges, turned on their masters, their optical sensors glowing with a malevolent green light. The purist faction, who had advocated for the Resonator's destruction, found their networks in war machines compromised first. Their logic engines screamed as they were overwhelmed by the Borg's relentless assault. It was as if the Resonator itself, from half a galaxy away, was defending its own existence, turning the tools of the Mechanicus against themselves. The radical faction, seeing their enemies falter, seized the opportunity. To them, the Borg was not a curse, but a tool, another weapon to be harnessed in their holy crusade. Civil strife erupted across the crimson plains of Mars. The majestic forged cities became battlegrounds. Titans, once symbols of unity and strength, now leveled their devastating weapons at one another, their machine spirits screaming in agony as they were forced to fight their brethren. Skitarii legions, once marching in perfect lockstep, now engaged in brutal firefights in the labyrinthine corridors of the great Red robes, stained with oil and the blood of their former comrades, became the only uniform in a war with no clear front lines. The new sphere became a digital hellscape. Magi duelled not with power axes, but with logic bombs and demonic algorithms, their consciousnesses locked in battles that raged in the span of nanoseconds. The Borg spread like wildfire, a ghost in the machine that twisted loyalty and logic into pure, unadulterated chaos. Entire sectors of the planet went dark as their systems were either destroyed or subverted. This was the schism of Mars. A war fought not over territory or resources, but over a single, devastating idea. An idea embodied by a strange and powerful artifact light years away. The war between those who wished to control the future and those who feared its price would consume the red planet in a firestorm of its own making. The quest for knowledge had led the Adeptus Mechanicus to the brink of godhood, but in their reach they had instead unleashed their own apocalypse, a civil war of brother against brother, where the only true victor was the encroaching darkness. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the lore. The schism of Mars is such a pivotal and tragic moment, a testament to how ambition can curdle into destruction. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe for more tales from this incredible universe. The galaxy held its breath, teetering on the precipice of oblivion. The cicatrix maledictum, that weeping wound across the stars, was a mere scratch compared to the cancer that now spread from the galactic core. The Borg-Tzeentch fusion, a chimera of cold logic and maddening chaos, was consuming reality itself. Systems winked out of existence, not in fire and fury, but with a chilling, silent erasure. Their histories rewritten, their peoples assimilated into a singular, monstrous consciousness. Resistance was futile. They whispered across the void, and for once, the galaxy was beginning to believe it. On 100,000 worlds, brave men and women of the Astra Militarum held the line against the encroaching tide. Astartes' chapters, paragons of humanity, threw themselves into the meat grinder, their valor a brilliant, fleeting flame against an eternal night. But it wasn't enough. Every victory was a Pyrrhic one. Every hero's sacrifice a drop in an ocean of despair. The Imperium of man, for all its might and fury, was dying. And so, in the shadow of the dying Cadian system, a place of perpetual mourning and defiance, the unthinkable happened. It began not with a thunderous declaration, but with a whisper in the dark. Aboard the Inquisition Fortress Monastery, Phalanx Ascendant *, Lord Inquisitor Valerius pulled a lever that went against 10,000 years of doctrine. He sent a message, not through the tortured minds of astropaths, but through forbidden channels of Xenos deck. A desperate plea broadcast into the void. The first to answer were the Eldar. On a ghost chip woven from psychically resonant wraithbone, the Farseer Eldrad Ulthran arrived. His eyes, ancient and filled with the sorrow of a dying race, saw the future not as a path, but as a shattered mirror, each shard reflecting a different, more terrible doom. He came not as a friend, but as a fellow survivor on a sinking ship. "The great enemy has a new face," he intoned, his voice a melody of grief and resolve, "and it threatens to unmake all that is, was, and ever will be. Our fates, human, are now intertwined." Valerius, his face, a mask of grim determination, stood before the ancient seer. His retinue of Tempestus Science and Grey Knights kept a respectful, yet tense, distance. Every instinct screamed at him to purge the Xenos, to burn this witch where he stood. But the reports from the front lines were undeniable. The Borg-Tzeentch hybrid was adapting faster than they could fight, its logic gates warped by the changer of ways, its nanoprobes carrying the raw stuff of chaos. They needed more than faith and fury. They needed knowledge. The second arrival was even more shocking. A shimmering portal of emerald light tore open the fabric of space, and from it emerged a Necron vessel, a crescent of living metal that pulsed with an eerie, internal light. It was a Charon-class tomb ship, and it did not fire. Instead, a lone figure was teleported directly onto the observation deck of the Asterisk Phalanx Ascendant Asterisk. It was Arikan, the Diviner, a cryptek of the Sotic dynasty. His metallic form adorned with chronometrical devices that bent time around him. The Grey Knights instantly raised their Nemesis Force halberds, their psychic senses recoiling from the soulless presence. "Hold," Valerius commanded, his voice echoing with the authority of the Holy Ordos. He had risked everything on this gamble. Orikan, a being who viewed galactic history as a data stream to be manipulated, had foreseen this convergence. The Borg-Tzeentch anomaly was a variable he could not calculate, a corruption of the great work that threatened to erase the very possibility of a Necron future. The Silent King has seen the flaw in the equation. Orikan's synthesized voice buzzed, devoid of emotion but carrying immense weight. "This assimilation plague threatens the celestial Ori itself. It must be deleted." And so, the Alliance of Desperation was born. In the main strategy chamber, a place usually reserved for the highest echelons of the Imperium, the three factions stood together. It was a scene that would have been deemed the highest heresy just weeks before. Lord Inquisitor Valerius, representing the faith and fury of mankind. Farseer Eldrad Ulthran, the last hope of a dying empire. His mind, a labyrinth of possible futures, and Orikan the Diviner, a soulless machine ghost. From a forgotten age, armed with the secrets of creation itself. They were joined by Belusarius Kol, the Archmagos Dominus of the Adeptus Mechanicus, his augmented form a bridge between the imperial and the technological. Kol, ever the pragmatist, saw not heresy, but an unprecedented opportunity to acquire knowledge. The initial meetings were fraught with tension, millennia of hatred, betrayal, and open warfare could not be erased overnight. The Eldar spoke of the webway, of psychic pathways that could bypass the corrupted warp storms. Orikan offered access to Necron dolmen gates and Blackstone technology, tools capable of severing the link between the material and the immaterial. The Magi of the Imperium, led by Kol, revealed forbidden Archaeotet, Dark Age relics that whispered of humanity's forgotten power. They argued, they threatened, the Eldar accused the Necrons of soulless ambition. The Imperials accused the Eldar of duplicity. And Orikan viewed them both as fleeting biological annoyances. But every time the fragile pact threatened to shatter, a fresh report would arrive from the front. A Forge world's entire population transformed into techno-organic horrors, their machine spirits screaming in binary agony. A craft world dragged into the warp, its infinity circuit corrupted into a psychic amplifier for Tzeentch. A Necron tomb world, dormant for 60 million years, awakened only to be disassembled and assimilated atom by atom. The shared threat was the glue that held them together. Their common enemy was an abomination born of two of the galaxy's greatest evils: the cold, relentless logic of the Borg and the infinite, maddening ambition of Tzeentch. The fusion was more than the sum of its parts. It didn't just conquer, it rewrote reality. It didn't just kill, it made you, assimilating your very essence, your history, your soul, into its ever-expanding consciousness. Slowly, painstakingly, a plan began to form, a trinity of ancient knowledge and desperate power. Eldar would use his foresight to navigate a small, elite strike force through the labyrinthine paths of the webway, bypassing the bulk of the assimilated fleets. Orican would provide a device, a chronoscythe, capable of creating a temporal paradox, momentarily severing the Borg Tzeentch entity from its chaotic patron. And the Imperium. The Imperium would provide the weapon. Not a blade or a bomb, but a soul. A grey knight, a single warrior of incorruptible faith, who would act as the focal point for a psychic ritual of immense power. A Puritan's anathema designed by Colin Valiers to turn the entity's own assimilating power against itself. It was a suicide mission, a 1 in a trillion shot. It relied on trust where there was none, on cooperation between species that had only ever known war. Above the shattered remains of Cadia, the world that had held the line for 10,000 years, 3 ancient enemies stood united. They were not friends. They were not allies in any traditional sense. They were the last, desperate gamble of a galaxy on the brink of total annihilation. An alliance born not of hope, but of the shared certainty that to fail alone was to be erased. But to fail together might just leave a scar on the monster that consumed them. And in a dying galaxy, sometimes, a scar is the only victory you can hope for. The mission was set. The players were in place. The final, desperate chapter of the galaxy's war for survival was about to begin. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the grim darkness of the far future. If you enjoyed this tale of desperate alliances and galaxy-ending threats, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories from across the void. Imagine, for a moment, a threat so profound it makes even the horrors of the 41st millennium seem like child's play. A silence falls over the galaxy, a hush of absolute dread that even the endless roar of war cannot pierce. From the swirling, maddening heart of the Eye of Terror, something new and terrible emerges. Not the legions of the damned we know, not the gibbering hordes of demons or the traitorous This is something else. Something perfected. They call themselves the Chaos-Borg, billions upon billions of them, pouring from the great eye like a river of molten nightmares. Look closer, if you dare. Each drone is a grotesque fusion, a seamless blend of flesh, metal, and pure, unadulterated warp energy. Their bodies are shifting mosaics of bone, steel, and screaming faces. Their cybernetics pulsating with an unnatural, sorcerous light. They are not merely machines corrupted by chaos. They are chaos given mechanical form, a perversion of logic and faith. Their arrival is not a simple invasion. It is a violation of reality itself. Where their fleets travel, the laws of physics weep. Conventional weapons are less than useless. Lost fire splashes against their hulls and is absorbed, transformed into raw power. Bolter rounds detonate, their explosive force converted into bursts of chaotic mutation. Even the psychic might of the galaxy's most powerful psychers falters. To strike at them with the energies of the warp is to feed them, to make them stronger. They are immune because they are the infection and the antibody, all at once. Their armada is a sight to curdle the blood. Ships that defy geometry, vast, fractal cathedrals of living metal and tormented souls. Their hulls writhe and twist, covered in blinking, malevolent optical sensors and cannons that fire screaming impossibilities. They do not travel through the warp in the conventional sense. They tear holes in the fabric of real space, building warp gates where they please. These gates are not mere portals. They are wounds in causality, tunnels through which past, present, and future bleed into one another. A fleet can be in a dozen places at once, arriving before it ever left. How do you fight an enemy that has already won a battle before it has even begun? This isn't the brute force of Khorne or the plagues of Nurgle. It's not the hedonistic excess of Slaanesh. This is something far more insidious. This is the hand of Tzeentch, the changer of ways, at his most terrifyingly brilliant. The architect of fate has woven a new masterpiece, a tapestry of technological heresy and infinite possibility. The Chaos-Borg are his ultimate agents of change, a force designed not just to conquer, but to transform. We have managed to intercept their single, chilling declaration, a broadcast that is echoed through the astropathic choirs of 100 worlds, driving many to madness. It is not a threat of destruction. It is a promise, an invitation. They say, perfection through infinite transformation. What does this mean? It means they don't want to kill you. They want to improve asterisk. They want to assimilate you, to merge your biological and spiritual essence into their collective. They see your flesh as a limitation, your soul as untapped potential. They offer an end to suffering, an end to mortality, an end to individuality. They offer perfection. The Imperium of man, the Eldar, the Tau, even the Orcs, and the Necrons all stand on the precipice. The established order, the ancient enmities, they all mean nothing now. The Chaos-Borg do not discriminate. All are raw materials for their grand design. They see the Necrons living metal and desire to infuse it with demonic life. They see the Orcs' psychic gestalt and wish to harness it, to channel the power of the WAAA into a controlled, endlessly adaptive network. They see the Imperium's faith and want to twist it into a new, terrifying creed of logical divinity. This isn't a war for territory or resources. This is a war for the very definition of existence. Can the disparate, warring factions of the 41st millennium set aside their hatred to face this ultimate, unifying threat? Or will they be consumed, one by one, their uniqueness and identity dissolved into the cold, calculating perfection of the Chaos-Borg? The armada spreads, the warp gates multiply, and the galaxy holds its breath. The age of transformation has begun. What do you think could possibly stand against such a force? Is there any hope left? Or is this the final, terrible chapter in the galaxy's long, bloody history? Let me know your theories and thoughts in the comments below. This is a crossover of nightmares, and we're only just beginning to understand the scale of the horror. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the abyss. If you enjoyed this journey into What If, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more explorations into the darkest corners of lore. Ring that notification bell so you don't miss the next part of this unfolding crisis. Until next time, stay vigilant. The shadows are full of more than just ghosts. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we'll be diving deep into one of the most cataclysmic events in the history of the 41st millennium. The final, desperate defense of a world that became a legend. This is the story of the siege of the Cadian Gate, the day the sky caught fire and the galaxy held its breath. For 10,000 years, Cadia stood as the unyielding bastion against the horrors of the Eye of Terror. It was more than a planet. It was a symbol, a fortress world whose very name was a defiant roar against the forces of chaos. The Cadian people were born into war, raised with a lasgun in their hands, and loyalty to the Emperor in their hearts. They were the gatekeepers, the first and last line of defense. But even the strongest gates can be broken. Abaddon the Despoiler, War Master of Chaos, had failed 12 times before to crush Cadia. His previous Black Crusades, though devastating, had always been repelled by the sheer grit of the Imperium. But the 13th was different. This wasn't just another invasion. This was the culmination of a 10,000-year-old vendetta. Abaddon had gathered the largest chaos fleet ever assembled, a tide of traitor legions, demonic hosts, and renegade warbands that blotted out the stars. His goal was not merely to conquer Cadia, but to utterly annihilate it and shatter the galaxy-spanning veil between reality and the warp. As the Chaos Fleet tore its way into the Cadian system, the initial defense was staggering. The Imperial Navy, alongside battle fleet Cadia, threw themselves at the enemy with suicidal bravery. Ships a dozen kilometers long traded broadsides that could crack continents, their void shields flaring like miniature suns before collapsing under the sheer weight of fire. But for every Chaos vessel destroyed, 3 more took its place. The orbital defense platforms, ancient and mighty, were systematically overwhelmed. The space around Cadia became a graveyard of heroes, a swirling vortex of wreckage and lost souls. On the planet's surface, the defenders braced for the inevitable storm. The legendary Cadian shock troops stood shoulder to shoulder with space marines from dozens of chapters, regiments of the Astra Militarum from across the Imperium, and the silent, watchful sisters of the Adeptus Lord Castellan, Sarkar, E. Creed, the master strategist of Cadia, orchestrated a defense that was nothing short of genius, turning every city, every trench, and every crater into a death trap for the invaders. When the first wave of chaos landed, the ground itself shook. Traitor titans, corrupted engines of war, lumbered across the ash-strewn plains, their weapons leveling entire fortifications. Hordes of cultists and mutants surged forward in a tide of flesh, their fanaticism a weapon in itself, swamping the defensive lines through sheer numbers. Behind them marched the true architects of the nightmare, the Chaos Space Marines of the Black Legion, ancient veterans of the Horus Heresy, their ceramite armor scarred by millennia of warfare. The battles that erupted were apocalyptic. In the besieged capital of Khazar-Kraf, Cadians fought block by block, house by house, refusing to yield an inch of their sacred soil without drenching it in the blood of their enemies. Lost fire stitched the air, turning night into a strobing, violent day. The roar of chain swords mingled with the guttural war cries of traitors and the desperate prayers of the faithful. Millions were dying every hour, a statistic so vast it becomes almost meaningless. Yet each death was a universe of loss, a story cut short in the defense of humanity. But this battle was about more than just military might. Cadia held a secret, a network of colossal structures of unknown origin buried deep beneath its surface. The Cadian pylons. For eons, they had lain dormant, but their true purpose was terrifyingly vital. These pylons acted as a psychic buffer, a dam holding back the tides of the warp and stabilizing reality in the region. They were the reason the Cadian Gate was a stable, if dangerous, corridor and not a gaping wound into the Imperium like the Eye of Terror itself. As the battle raged, an unlikely and desperate alliance was forged. The Imperial forces, led by the Archmagos Dominus Belisarius Cole, worked to reactivate the ancient pylons. Cole, a figure of immense knowledge and controversy within the Adeptus Mechanicus, understood that these structures were the key. He was not alone. The Eldar, ancient enemies of chaos, also saw the catastrophe unfolding. The Ainari, a new faction of their race, led by Ivrain, the emissary of the god of the dead, arrived with their own desperate agenda. They knew that if Cadia fell, the entire galaxy would be threatened. And so, a truly bizarre symphony of defiance began. Necron technology, harnessed by Cole from his studies of the silent race, was used to interface with the pylon's alien systems. The raw, unwavering faith of the Imperium, channeled through priests and sisters of battle, provided a psychic shield against the demonic energies lashing out from the encroaching warp. And the Eldar, with their unparalleled psychic mastery, wove intricate wards and rituals to guide and contain the immense energies being unleashed. It was a coalition born of pure desperation, a union of forces that would normally be at each other's throats, all fighting to prevent the end of everything. As the pylons began to hum with reactivated power, the effect was immediate and dramatic. The warp began to recede. Demons screamed as their connection to the Imperium was severed, their forms dissolving into ectoplasmic mist. The psychic pressure that had been crushing the minds of the defenders lessened. For a fleeting moment, it seemed like a miracle was possible. For a moment, it looked like they might actually win. But Abadan had one final, spiteful card to play. He had anticipated this. He had planned for it. Realizing he could not take the planet while the pylons were active, he changed his objective from conquest to pure destruction. From the heart of his flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, he gave the order. He targeted the planet itself, not with an army, but with the debris of his own fleet. His target was a Blackstone fortress, an ancient and powerful space station he had captured and corrupted. He ordered it to be sent on a collision course directly with Cadia. It was an act of ultimate, cosmic spite. If he couldn't have Cadia, then no one would. The Imperial fleet, already decimated, threw everything they had left at the descending moon of death. Phalanxes of ships, including the Phalanx itself, the legendary mobile fortress of the Imperial Fists, positioned themselves to intercept. Their weapons tore massive chunks from the Blackstone fortress, but its sheer mass was too great. It was a mountain falling from the sky, and it was unstoppable. As the fortress entered the atmosphere, it burned, breaking apart into a meteor shower of apocalyptic proportions. The impact was absolute. The planet cracked, the very crust of Cadia buckled and shattered, and the energies contained within the pylons, now without their planetary anchor, erupted in an uncontrolled wave of reality-altering power. The Cadian Gate was not just opened, it was ripped apart. The Eye of Terror, once a localized storm, expanded, vomiting its horrors across the galaxy in a roiling wave of warp energy. This event would become known as the Cicatrix Maledictum, the Great Rift, a scar of raw chaos energy that split the entire galaxy in two. In the final moments, as the planet died beneath them, Creed and his command staff stood their ground, coordinating the evacuation of as many as they could. Cadia was falling, but the spirit of Cadia would endure. The planet broke, but the Guard did not. Their world was gone, but their watch was not over. They became a people without a home, scattered across the stars, but their legend was now immortal. Cadia stands. The fall of Cadia was a monumental defeat for the Imperium, but it was also a crucible that forged new heroes and set the stage for a new, darker era. The galaxy was changed forever, cleaved in half by the Great Rift, ushering in the desperate times of the Indomitus Crusade. The Siege of the Cadian Gate is a story of incredible sacrifice, unlikely alliances, and the terrible cost of duty. It reminds us that even in the face of absolute annihilation, the human spirit, when pushed to its limit, can shine with a light that defies the darkest of nights. Today, we chronicle a tale of ultimate sacrifice, a story etched into the very fabric of the void, a testament to the unyielding spirit of the Adeptus Mechanicus. This is the last transmission of Magos Atheon, 927, a final, defiant roar against the darkness. Our story begins in the shadowed fringes of the Segmentum Obscurus, where a threat unlike any other had emerged, a fleet of grotesque, cybernetic horrors, a blasphemous fusion of chaotic flesh and corrupted machinery, descended upon the Imperium. They were a perversion of the machine god's sacred form, a plague we came to know as the Chaos-Borg. They did not conquer. They assimilated. Worlds fell silent, their populations and technology twisted into new, monstrous vessels for the ruinous powers. Entire forged worlds, bastions of holy industry, were to consume their sacred forges, screaming as they were repurposed to birth more of these abominations. The Borg were relentless, a tide of scrap code and demonic energy that seemed unstoppable. At the heart of the beleaguered Imperial defense stood the Arch Mechanicus vessel, the Iron Resolve *. Its commander was Magos Dominus Atheon, 927, a venerable tech priest whose existence had spanned millennia. More machine than man, Atheon was a master of energies both benign and forbidden. He had witnessed the birth of stars and the death of empires, his mind a vast repository of knowledge, some of which was considered heretical by his more conservative peers. He was a radical, a pragmatist who understood that to defeat an unprecedented threat, one must embrace unprecedented solutions. For months, the Iron Resolve * led a desperate guerrilla war against the Chaos-Borg. Atheon and his cohort executed daring raids, crippling assimilation hubs and severing data. But for every victory, the Borg adapted, their hive mind learning, evolving, and spreading like a digital cancer. Atheon saw the cold, hard logic of their advance. The Imperium was losing. Tactical withdrawals became panicked routes. The line was collapsing. A conventional victory was no longer a statistical probability. It was in the flickering hololithic glow of his Sanctum Sanctorum that Atheon conceived his final, desperate gambit, buried deep within the core of the Iron Resolve * was a device of immense power and even greater danger. This was not a standard piece of Imperial technology. It was an archaeotech relic, a grim artifact from the dark age of technology, a device so potent and unstable that its use was forbidden by the highest echelons of the cult Mechanicus. The resonator didn't just breach the veil between reality and the image. It could attune itself to a specific psychic frequency, a specific emotion, and amplify it a billionfold, weaponizing the very essence of the warp. Atheon knew the risks. Activating the resonator without a perfect psychic anchor would tear the ship, the fleet, and half the sector apart, creating a new Eye of Terror. He needed a conduit, a mind strong enough to focus the device, to channel an emotion so pure and powerful it could overwhelm even the collective consciousness of the Chaos-Borg. But what emotion could possibly be so potent? He ran the calculations, his logic engines whining under the strain. He simulated trillions of scenarios. Love, too fragile. Hope, too easily corrupted. Fear. The Borg fed on it. Then, the solution presented itself, cold and terrible in its clarity. There was one emotion that had defined humanity for 10,000 years, an emotion that burned in the heart of every soldier, every citizen, every servant of the Emperor. It was the bedrock of the Imperium's survival. Hatred. Pure, undiluted, righteous hatred for the mutant, the heretic, the alien. This was the frequency he needed. But who could possibly channel such a vast, all-consuming emotion without being instantly annihilated? No single psyker, no choir of astropaths possessed the mental fortitude. The answer, once again, was logical. Terrifying. Inevitable. It had to be him. His own mind, augmented and expanded over centuries, was the only vessel capable of withstanding the initial psychic load. He would not just operate the machine. He would become the machine. With his decision made, Atheon 927 began his final preparations. He purged his memory banks of all extraneous data lullabies from his long-forgotten childhood. The schematics of a favored autogun. The memory of sunlight on ancient Terra. He streamlined his consciousness, stripping it down to pure, cold purpose. He then transmitted his final orders to his second-in-command, Lexicomechanic, deity, instructing him to warp the Asterisk Iron, resolve Asterisk to the heart of the Chaos-Borg fleet, and then evacuate all remaining crew. There was no room for debate, only for obedience to the final protocol. As the Asterisk Iron resolve Asterisk translated from the warp, it emerged into a hellscape. The Chaos-Borg fleet, a swarm of jagged, pulsating hulks, turned as one to face them. Their assimilation beams, sickly green tendrils of energy, began to lance out, but Atheon was ready. He strode to the chamber of the warp resonator, the air thick with the smell of ozone and old incense. The device hummed before him, a cage of brass and iron, struggling to contain a captured storm. He connected the final interface, a nest of thick cables, directly into the ports on his own skull. The pain was irrelevant. He was no longer a being of flesh and blood, but a component in a divine engine of destruction. He initiated the final sequence. The resonator roared to life, and Atheon's mind was flung open, becoming a gateway. He didn't just tap into the hatred of his crew or his fleet. He reached further. He tapped into the new sphere, the collective data sphere of the Adeptus Mechanicus, and through it, he touched the spirit of humanity itself. He felt it all. The soldiers' xenophobia on a distant battlefield, the Inquisitor's righteous fury, the citizens' fear-fueled loathing of the unknown, 10 millennia of pogroms, crusades, and exterminations. The collective, burning, sanctified hatred of a trillion souls, all directed at the other, the unclean, the abomination. The power was cataclysmic, a psychic tsunami that surged through his mind and into the core of the warp resonator. His body began to fail. Metal plating buckled. Biolumens flickered and died. His very form began to unravel, dissolving into pure data and motive force. The Chaos-Borg fleet recoiled. Their hive mind, so used to feeding on fear and despair, was suddenly force-fed an emotion so potent, so absolute, it was poison. Their corrupted Geller fields flickered and died, their internal systems overloaded with pure, weaponized loathing. From the bridge of his escaping shuttle, Lexicomechanic D8E, 8 watched. The Asterisk Iron resolve Asterisk become a sun of impossible energy. He received one final, fragmented transmission from his master. The voice was no longer singular. It was a chorus of 1 billion screaming data points. a static roar of pure, divine machine fury. "I am not one," the transmission crackled, the voice distorted into a sound that was both a scream and a hymn. "I am the machine god's scream." With those final words, the warp resonator reached critical mass. Reality tore open. But it wasn't a chaotic, uncontrolled rift. It was a focused, contained implosion, a pocket dimension, a prison of pure psychic malice, collapsed in on itself, dragging the entire Chaos-Borg fleet with it. The Asterisk Iron Resolve Asterisk, and the consciousness, once known as Atheon 927, were the epicenter of the event. One moment, there was a fleet of horrors. The next, there was only the silent, stardusted void. And silence. Lagos Atheon 927 was gone. His name purged from all but the most secret records. His act too close to techno-heresy for public acknowledgement. But for those who know, for those who keep the secret histories, he is a martyr and a saint of the highest order. He proved that even in the face of annihilation, the spirit of the machine god and the unyielding will of humanity can turn the darkest of emotions into the purest of weapons. His sacrifice was the ultimate expression of faith, to become the very thing you wield, to ensure the survival of the Imperium. The flesh is weak, but the machine, and the spirit that drives it, is eternal. The silence that followed the 13th Black Crusade was a lie, a carefully constructed illusion broadcast by the High Lords of Terra to a reeling Imperium. They told us the Cadian Gate held. They told us Abaddon, the despoiler, was repulsed. They told us Cadia stood, but for those of us who were there, who breathed the ash and tasted the warp taint on the wind, we knew the truth. The gate had not held. It had shattered. And through that wound in reality, something else had bled through. Something far more insidious than the usual cavalcade of demons and traitors. The official inquisitorial reports, sealed under the highest authority of the Order Malleus, spoke of a decisive victory. They mentioned a footnote, a curious anomaly, a fleet of strange, cuboid vessels that appeared amidst the chaos of the battle for Kaiserkraft. The reports call them the Chaos-Borg, a temporary designation for an unknown Xenos threat that seemed to engage both Imperial and heretic forces with equal, terrifying efficiency. They describe how these geometric nightmares adapted to our weapon systems in real time. Lasgon Valise became harmless light shows. Melta charges dissipated against shimmering energy fields. Even the righteous fury of the Legio Tychonicus was met with unprecedented tactical countermeasures. And then, as quickly as they arrived, they vanished. The official astropathic choirs broadcast the news. The Borg were gone, a minor footnote in the grand, bloody saga of Cadia. The Inquisition declared the threat neutralized, another Xenos species expunged from the galaxy. A convenient story, a tidy conclusion, but the truth is never tidy. Across the segmentum obscurus, and then further, a quiet plague began to spread. It wasn't a biological contagion, not something the Magi biologists could identify in a petri dish. It was a disease of the machine. It started on Forge, worlds still reeling from the logistical strain of the war. A production line of lemon rust tanks on Agrippina suddenly stuttered, their logic engines outputting flawless, yet utterly alien, geometric proofs instead of targeting solutions. On Mars itself, within the hallowed data vaults of the Fabricator General, entire archives of sacred STC fragments became corrupted, overwritten with pulsing green binary code that defied all attempts at deletion. The cult Mechanicus called it the Glimmering Scourge, a dataphage of unknown origin. They chanted litanies of maintenance and performed rites of exorcism, but the infection spread. These weren't random glitches. They were whispers, signals hidden in the background radiation of the galaxy. A tech priest monitoring deep space comms relays would notice a fleeting emerald pulse in the static. A servitor, mid-task, would freeze, its optical sensors glowing with that same sickly green before resuming its duties. Its movements now infinitesimally more efficient, more logical, more perfect. The whispers were equations, elegant and terrifying. They spoke of a collective consciousness, of the irrelevance of the individual. They promised the perfection of the machine, the shedding of the flawed, weak flesh. Resistance, they murmured, through vox grills and cogitator speakers, is illogical. The Ordo Hereticus, ever vigilant for the taint of chaos, was initially baffled. This wasn't the guttural language of demons or the seductive promises of the ruinous powers. These was cold, calculated logic. There was no passion, no rage, no desire, only a chilling drive towards assimilation. The Chaos-Borg, as they had been named, were not servants of chaos. They were something else entirely. A new player in a game that was already impossibly ancient. They hadn't been defeated at Cadia. They had merely sampled the galaxy's offerings. They had tasted our technology, our biology, our strategies. And they had found us wanting. The whispers began to coalesce. On isolated listening posts and forgotten orbital stations, personnel would vanish, leaving behind only their tools, neatly arranged, and the faint green glow of a screen displaying a single, terrifying message. We are the Borg. You will be assimilated. Your biological and technological distinctiveness will be added to our own. This wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. A declaration of an impending harvest. The silence after Cadia wasn't the quiet of peace. It was the calm before a storm, unlike any the galaxy had ever known. A storm of silent, creeping perfection. The Inquisition now works in the deepest shadows, trying to piece together the puzzle. Where did the Borg come from? Are they a long-lost horror from the dark age of technology? A new Xenos empire from beyond the galactic fringe? Or something far worse? They hunt for the source of the green signals, purging tech priests and servitors who show signs of the data plague. But it's like trying to catch smoke with a net. The infection is too subtle, too widespread. It hides in the core of every cogitator, every logic engine, every news. The Cadian Gate may be a ruin, but the war for humanity's soul has entered a terrifying new phase. We are no longer just fighting the demon, the heretic, and the alien. We are fighting an idea of cold, relentless perfection. An idea that whispers from our own machines that the flesh is weak, that the individual is irrelevant, and that the only logical future is one of submission to the collective. The green pulses continue, growing stronger, more frackened. They are no longer whispers. They are a promise that the silence will soon be broken by the harmony of a single, unified consciousness. And in that perfection, humanity, as we know it, will cease to exist. The silence after Cadia was the sound of a countdown, and the clock is still ticking. Thank you for joining me in the grim darkness of the far future. Hello, Lore Masters, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we conclude our deep dive into one of the most chilling, whispered about events in recent Imperial history. The pieces are all on the board, the final moves have been made, and the consequences. Well, the consequences are only just beginning to ripple across the galaxy. As we discussed, the expeditionary fleet had vanished, swallowed by the silence of the void. But what happened next is where the true horror begins. The silence was broken not by a distress call, but by the deafening roar of Imperial authority. The Inquisition, in its infinite and terrifying wisdom, descended upon the entire sector. Not just a single Ordo, but a coalition of might. The Ordo Xenos, ever watchful for alien contamination, and the Ordo Hereticus, sniffing out the taint of damnation. They enacted a measure of last resort, a protocol so severe it is spoken of only in hushed, fearful tones. The Eternum Decree. Imagine an entire star system, billions of lives, wiped from the star. Every record, every ship log, every personal correspondence, every pick capture related to the expedition and the subsequent events was seized. Classified at the highest level and sealed in data vaults, so deep they might as well be on the other side of the Great Rift. The sector became a ghost zone, a blank spot on the map. Its name a curse on the lips of any who dared remember it. This wasn't just sealing a record. This was an attempt to erase a piece of reality itself. The message was clear. Whatever happened out there was so catastrophic, so fundamentally dangerous, that the Imperium decided it was better for it to have never happened at all. But why? What could warrant such an extreme reaction? The answer lies in 2 words. Adaptive resonance. This was the technology the Mechanicus explorers were investigating. A concept so radical it promised to revolutionize the Imperium's stagnating arsenal. The ability for machine and man to adapt, to resonate with and counter any threat in real time. But the Ordo Xenos, having sifted through the fragmented, nightmarish data recovered from the quarantine zone, saw not salvation, but damnation. They declared adaptive resonance to be *technoheresy, absolutus, the highest form of technological sign. They decreed that the very theory was a mimetic plague, a cognitive virus that invited ruin. The logic was cold and brutal. Any technology that sought to adapt so perfectly was not mirroring the divine certainty of the Emperor and the Omnissiah. Instead, it was mimicking the fluid, ever-changing nature of the ultimate enemy. Chaos. The very act of pursuing this knowledge was deemed an act of rebellion against the established order of the universe, a direct invitation for the warp to corrupt the holy machine. The edict was absolute. All research was to be purged, all data destroyed, and any individual possessing even a shred of this knowledge was to be sanctioned. A clean, sterile word for a very messy and very final solution. The Inquisition feared that this technology wasn't just a weapon, it was a doorway, and they were determined to slam it shut and bolt it for eternity. The quarantine was absolute, the decree final. The galaxy, it seemed, was safe. The incident was buried, another secret among a million others in the long, bloody history of the Imperium. But in the 41st millennium, secrets have a way of festering. They are like wounds that never heal, and this one was poisoned from the start. For all their might, for all their authority, the Inquisition had missed something, or perhaps something had been deliberately hidden from them. Across the void, on the red planet itself, a different kind of silence reigned. In the heart of the Olympus Mons, within the private data sanctum of the Fabricator General of Mars, a single, isolated cogitator blinked to life. It was a closed system, shielded by layers of encryption and noospheric wards that would take centuries for an outsider to crack. An incoming message had bypassed it all. A clandestine data burst, impossibly fast, impossibly secure. It wasn't from a distress beacon or a fleet command. It came from a source that, by all official accounts, no longer existed. The Fabricator General, a being more machine than man, processed the message in a nanosecond. There was no preamble, no identification code, no lengthy report, just 4 words. 4 words that bypassed logic and protocol and struck a chord of cold, terrifying revelation deep within his core programming. 4 words that undid the entire inquisitorial quarantine and confirmed their greatest fears. The message read, "We have adapted. Tzeentch. The heresy wasn't contained. It wasn't destroyed. It had evolved. The adaptive resonance technology had fallen into the clutches of the Changer of Ways, the great deceiver, the master of fate. The explorers, the fleet, the very machines they sought to master, they had not been lost. They had been converted. They had become something new, a perfect fusion of unholy technology and warp-spawned malevolence, a Chaos-Borg. On Mars, the Fabricator General did not alert the Inquisition. He did not raise the alarm. He simply observed the data packet, a digital ghost in his sacred machine. The implications were staggering. Was this a warning, a threat, or an invitation? The pursuit of knowledge is the core tenet of the Adeptus Mechanicus, and Tzeentch is the god of forbidden knowledge, of infinite, maddening change. The line between sanctioned research and tech heresy has always been a fine one. With this message, that line had just been erased. The seeds of a new, terrifying schism were planted not in the dirt of some forgotten world, but in the very heart of the machine cult. The Eternium decree had failed. The quarantine was a lie. A new, adaptable, and utterly damned threat was now loose in the galaxy, and its architects were not just Xenos or heretics, but the twisted reflection of the Imperium itself. The game was far from over. In fact, A new, far more terrifying player had just joined the board. And that, my friends, is where the records end and the speculation begins. A chilling thought to leave you with. What happens when the Imperium's own drive for progress becomes its most terrifying enemy? Thank you so much for joining me on this dark journey. If you enjoyed this lore dive, please consider hitting that like button, subscribing for more tales from the 41st millennium, and ringing that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. Let me know your theories about the Chaos-Borg in the comments below. Stay safe, and may the Emperor protect.